Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and really delighted and perfect timing to have back with us today Matt Purple. He is the author of Decline from the Top. He also snapshots from American crises and glimmers of hope. He's the editor and journalist for quite a few magazines and periodicals: The Spectator, The American Conservative, National Review, The Washington Examiner, just to mention a few. There's a picture of the cover of his book on the screen there, Decline from the Top there, so check it out. Matt, good to see you again. How are you, friend?
Hi, Perry. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Where are you? Where are we Skyping you in from?
I'm in Alexandria, Virginia, on a very rainy day here today.
Okay. Well, we're borderline snowed in here, so
Yeah.
good going. Good to see you again. Thanks for your time. Wow, it's been quite of a whirlwind a couple of weeks with this new administration. What's your 30,000-foot view?
I think that Donald Trump is moving fast and not being afraid to break things if he needs to. I mean, you're right. It's been a real whirlwind. It can be hard to believe we're only about 2.5 weeks, I think under 2.5 weeks into the administration. He's already laid out a plan for trying to cut government spending, trying to overhaul the way government functions with DOGE. He's already, acted like he was going to start a trade war with Canada and Mexico, only to come to an agreement with them. We still have the tariffs up on China, but there's some, maybe going to be some movement eventually there as well. And just on, he's already sat down with Benjamin Netanyahu. So just on issue after issue, I think you're seeing a real surge of energy. And you often hear, we used to talk a lot about, especially during the Obama administration, a president's first 100 days, this idea from the FDR administration that, what can you get done in that honeymoon period when you have that early burst of energy? I think Trump is trying to get done a lot. And I think some of that stems from his first term, too, when he feels like he was stemmed. He was blocked in some ways from accomplishing his agenda by, actors within the government, his own cabinet in certain cases. I think he's determined to make up for lost time this time around.
What do you think his impact is with mentioning things that nobody else has thought about? Greenland, maybe annexing it in as a lot line adjustment with Maine, Canada being the 51st state, taking Panama back, and now maybe taking over Gaza. Those are wild things, but it moves the ball. What do you think internationally this means?
I think it's going to depend on what actually comes of this, right? It's still not entirely clear whether Trump is using this as leverage to try to get the border secure, to try to get things that he wants. I think that looks the clearest, given that he's postponed tariffs on both Canada and Mexico for the next month, or whether he does intend to be pretty aggressive. Whether he wants to bring in new territory into the United States, whether he's genuinely interested in Greenland, genuinely interested in Canada. It could be that both are kind of true at the same time. I've heard from people who say that his interest in Greenland is genuine, and when he's kind of like, when he gets something in his teeth, he can't let go of it. He just really wants it and he goes for it. So we'll see. It's going to prove interesting, but I think Trump's perspective right now, the Trump message right now is we are the most powerful, dynamic country in the world, and we do a lot for other nations. We are very interconnected with other countries through treaties, through the aid that we provide, through trade and so on. And we need to do more. We need to be getting more out of some of these relationships, starting with Canada and Mexico, starting with this fentanyl plague, really, that we've had here in the United States. And so he's leaning hard on that American advantage. He's leaning hard on the fact that we are the most powerful, economically successful country in the world. So it's certainly an aggressive perspective. We'll see where he takes it. We'll see how long it holds up.
Yesterday, Pam Bondi, was sworn in. Within hours, she's making some pretty fast decisions. It seems to be parallel to what the president wants and cleaning things up. What kind of an impact do you think is in that the DOJ is in for?
It remains to be seen, and I'll tell you why. Because it is very hard to change the civil service. And many a president has tried. The Reagan administration tried in many respects. That kind of got caught up in other priorities like waging the Cold War. Trump, to a more limited extent, tried in his first term. But the so-called deep state, as he likes to put it, they are autonomous to a certain extent, and they do have their own agenda, and they will try to block the agenda of presidents who they see as being out of line, who they don't agree with. They can slow walk things. All of this really does happen. And I think what particularly motivates Trump is that he views the DOJ as having gone after him personally. Trump is very much a personalist, and he takes this very personally. In particular, what happened with the DOJ, it sets it apart from, say, the EPA or the Department of Interior. He might have a more reformist perspective there, but it's not, hey, they tried to throw me in prison. It's not. So I think he's going to be particularly motivated. We're seeing real attempts at change, for example, with these government buyouts, with some of the funding that initially got frozen to the civil service. I think some of that is signaling. It's saying, look, the president has a right to attorneys at the Department of Justice and civil servants throughout the government who agree with him and who want to implement his agenda. He is the only officer in the executive branch who is in the Constitution. He's the only officer who is directly elected by the people, who answers to the people in a democratic republic. And therefore, he has the say here. And you can kind of get on board or get out. The civil service is very difficult. It doesn't turn easily. It's like a giant tank. It just takes a long time to kind of spin around. But Trump has made it clear this is what he wants.
There is one thing else that's happening here that could speed up the turnaround, and that is across the board, especially as his new leaders of agencies get into place. He's basically saying, step up and let us buy you out, or you're out. And that kind of elimination of employees all the way down through the ranks, I mean, that is a pretty significant deal that could speed up a turnaround, don't you think?
I think it's saying two things. It's saying, first of all, he wants that loyal civil service. It's also saying, subsequent Congress after subsequent Congress has tried to cut the budget, the federal budget. We've had filibusters, we've had, debt ceiling showdowns, on and on, really starting around 2010 for the past 15 years or so. And nothing has ever seriously gotten done. The budget has just continued to grow. The national debt has continued to grow. And I think he's saying, okay, we need to get this down to size. We need to make sure that we're being responsible to our children, and we need to make sure we have a responsible federal budget. And one way to do that is to kind of combine these two threads and say, hey, if you don't want to work for me, that's okay. You can go, and we'll either find somebody else to replace you who's on board, or maybe we won't replace you at all. I think that's probably he and Elon Musk are probably looking at the civil service from a business perspective, and they figure that's the first step. That's the first step to downsizing, so to speak. So go ahead.
Excuse me. That's his entrepreneurial experience coming out from running a business. But on the other hand, he is cutting the budget without going through Congress.
Yes, he is, and I'm torn about this because I'm a good old-fashioned conservative constitutionalist. I believe in the Constitution, and it's the power of the purse is right there in Article 1, right? It does. Congress is really supposed to be doing this, and maybe in a more sane age, we could have gotten the appropriation committees to take this seriously. But Congress has really been derelict on this. They've had all these chances. They've had all these Tea Party reformers who came in, and nothing has gotten done. Maybe you look somewhere else. Maybe you try a Hail Mary, you try something different like the Doge, like Elon Musk. There's no guarantee it's going to work because eventually this is going to have to go through Congress. And you look at the Grace Commission back under Ronald Reagan, which tried to recommended budget cuts too, and it didn't go anywhere because Democrats controlled Congress, so they just buried it. That being said, you do have Republican majorities, albeit tight Republican majorities in both houses. So it bodes better than it did under Reagan, I think.
Were you surprised, Matt, to see the list of unbelievable expenditures at the USAID office?
Yes, and Caroline Leavitt, the president's press secretary, is kind of taking a page out of Rand Paul's playbook, because Rand Paul for years has been publishing these rundowns of all just the ridiculous things that government spends money on, the studies on the mating habits of fruit flies and so on. And the White House has now kind of taken this up. They're talking about the birth control to Gaza and all the ridiculous USAID, the DEI office stuff. And I think, that's not necessarily a majority of government spending, but I think it gets people's attention because they understand that the government fiscally is not in a good place. So you got to kind of get down to the essentials, right? And so why are you spending money on all these things that not only sound like luxuries, but just sound plain ridiculous?
So how in the world can the left defend what U.S. aid has done? From the list that I saw over the weekend, it looked like 30 to 40% of the list was driven by social issues, primarily LGBTQ and transgender issues. That's a big portion. How in the world can the left justify that money going to foreign countries to advance that agenda?
Because I think they see those issues as just another part of human rights. Like we're the United States, we stand for human rights, therefore we stand for LGBTQ issues too, gay issues too. And I think that's now there's going to be very real pushback against that, because I think what Trump has signaled is that he wants a war on woke, that we're folding all the DEI. It's not just about the DEI offices within the government, although he's gotten rid of those pretty handily and pretty quickly. It's about this entire ideology that says we need to be funding, LGBTQ issues. We need to be investing government money in left-wing identity politics, really. I think a lot of what's happening right now is ideological warfare and saying we don't believe in this ideology. You've been funding this ideology for a long time, and we're going to shut it down. And, whenever a Republican president comes into office, one of the first things he does is just flip back the Mexico City policy, which allows, when Democrats come in, they allow taxpayer money to fund abortions in foreign countries. Republicans come in, they stop that, right? That's typical ping pong back and forth. What we're seeing now, I think, is a much broader interpretation of what social conservatism can look like within the federal government, which is to say not just the usual measures, the kind of stops to the base, but no, we're going to make a real effort to make sure the civil service is on board with what we believe and what we view to be socially, I don't know about socially conservative, but just sane, rather than woke.
One quick question before I take a break. Over the weekend, there's quite a movement against Elon Musk involvement, saying he's a non-elected official. What power does he have? Well, he really doesn't have any power. He just has the ability to suggest things to the president. He has the power. But do you think Elon's in trouble, or does he survive this?
We'll see. It could be. There's always rivalries that form within the federal government, and if an advisor gets too powerful, it can tick off people elsewhere in the administration, elsewhere in the Congress. Elon Musk, from what we know, is not necessarily on the best terms with people even in Mar-a-Lago. So it could be that, this is not going to be the longest lasting relationship. But I will say that the idea that somehow you can't have special advisors in the federal government is just nonsense. I mean, you might remember under the Obama administration, you had all these czars that President Obama brought in, which were basically just special advisors, kind of like Elon Musk, paid special advisors who advised the president on climate change and on, fiscal stuff and so on. In fact, the Obama administration set a record for the number of czars they brought in. So this does happen. It's the first time I think we've had somebody who is the richest man in the world serving in that position, but it's not like it's totally unprecedented.
Was there any indication of a fallout between Musk and Ramaswamy, or is it just Ramaswamy running to run for governor?
It depends on whether you believe all the rumors that are published in, various DC publications. I mean, this town is just all about innuendo and whispers, and everybody's always talking behind somebody else's back. I mean, it's exhausting, frankly, Perry. But yeah. I would say that If you do believe that, then Ramaswamy had ticked off some people within the administration, and some of that surely came from his coming out as strongly in favor of the H-1B visas and sending tweets that could be interpreted as insulting American workers. That isn't necessarily a conflict that the Trump administration wants to have right now, but I think that whatever the case is, he's not going to be a major player anymore, and we'll see what he's able to do in Ohio.
All right, let me take a quick break. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, where can they get your book, Matt?
Best place to go is just Amazon.com. You can type in Decline from the Top in the search box.
All right, check that out, and we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, and honored to have back with us today Matt Purple. He's the author of a fascinating book called Decline from the Top. You can Google that there at Amazon and download it or purchase it there. He's also an editor and journalist for, The Spectator, The American Conservative, National Review, Washington Examiner, just to mention a few. His book is a fascinating read and very strategic. It deals with snapshots from America's crises and glimmers of hope. Check it out. Matt, you recently spoke about the decline of traditional institutions like religion and education. The president seems to be pretty bent on eliminating the Department of Education, and just this morning, as he was speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast, he announced a commission to protect religious rights and freedoms in America. Where do you think those two things are going?
I think they're encouraging. I think when it comes to the Department of Education, we really began federalizing education in this country in earnest in the 1970s. The government also got involved in the student loan business back then, of course, too. And we've seen a fall off in test scores, in metrics. All the while, by the way, we've also seen college getting more and more and more unaffordable and more expensive. And, millennials graduating from college with an average of like $20,000 in unpaid student loans. That's a massive amount. So we're paying more and getting less is, I think, the right way to look at it. And, I don't think you can blame the Department of Education for all of that. There's a lot of different factors that run into that. There's ideology in the classroom and in the college. There's, an over-bureaucratization of our universities and even of our schools in some cases. But certainly, I think what we can say is this experiment in federalization has not made sense. It has not worked out the way everybody was hoping for it to. And so it may be that it's time to try something different. And religious schools, Christian schools, have a role to play in that, of course. And, Trump seems to be signaling that they are going to be protected, that their right to teach, their right to educate, and their right to practice their religion freely is going to be protected too.
So do you think this eventually will move towards a voucher system?
Maybe. So far that's been more of a state level issue. And we've seen some encouraging, like the Supreme Court case up there in Maine that found that, that protected religious schools when it came to vouchers. There's been, some encouraging developments in this regard. I do think certainly this is a marked departure from the Obama administration, for example, where the first thing he did when he came into office was to cancel the DC voucher program, just got rid of it. Here he is promising to help the disadvantaged and the poor. And the first thing he does is to take poor children and tell them, no, sorry, you have to go into these failure factory public schools along with everybody else. That's not going to be the Trump approach. And I think it's a very good thing that that's not going to be his approach.
So it's possible, a little bit of a parallel here, it's possible that education could go to the way of Roe versus Wade. It gets out of the federal control and set back to the state control, which will be a state battle. Is that how you see it going?
Maybe, yeah. And you could certainly argue that that's the best way to go. There was a lot of thinking about that back when we had Common Core. under Barack Obama, which was, again, another federalization of state, of the education system. It's not just Democrats who do that, by the way. You had No Child Left Behind under George W. Bush. But there's a lot of talk about, okay, this is not working. We should restore education powers to the states, which is how they used to be. On the other hand, our education system is so messed up and has become so shabby that you wonder if it has reached the point where it's a national issue, and we need something like a national curriculum or even just a national set of parameters to make sure children are being taught. It's a tricky subject. Conservatives, we tend to be states' rights types. We like it when a change starts at the bottom and then goes up to the top. And so localism is really the best way to proceed, subsidiarity, as the Catholics would say. On the other hand, I think we are talking about a problem that is national in scope. Yeah. And so you could really go either way on that.
Well, the president pretty much drilling down on this over the weekend or the last couple of days said that, out of the 40 top countries, we're number 40. We went from 37 to 40. That's a wake-up call to a lot of parents. Here in the state of Oregon, we're down at the bottom. We spend more money and get less results. So something's happened to education. There's a lot of finger-pointing going on. But the basics of education have been replaced with the indoctrination of wokeness. So there seems to be, something's hit the wall here. It's decision time. I'm wondering if America's ready for this battle.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, the Oregon public school system was always notorious. We were always aware of it as being like, this is not what you want to do. So it's interesting to hear that still hasn't changed. Yeah, it's, and there's another problem too, which is that you have this ideology, this left-wing woke ideology, and it really teaches you to dislike your own country. It says that we are a colonialist power, that we're racist, that, just flawed from the start. There's very little to admire about America because we're so bigoted. And remember, and this goes back to C.S. Lewis, The Abolition of Man. The purpose of an education is not just to make sure that people know things and are prepared for a career. It's to make sure that they can be responsible, active citizens. It's to prepare them not just for adulthood, but for citizenship. And if you're teaching people that the country in which you're going to be a citizen is just irredeemable, is beyond hope, you're not doing a good job of doing that. You're not doing that effectively. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we move forward too. How do we teach in a way that not just prepares kids for the future and ushers them into the next STEM job or whatever, but also prepares them to be good American citizens?
I want to come to your book in just a moment here, but one more big question. How shook up is Washington, D.C. these days?
Pretty shook. D.C. is funny, and I'm sure it differs from like Portland in this way, in that there actually have to be Republicans here, because there's Republican members of Congress and so on. So it's not as monolithically liberal or left-wing as I think a lot of cities sometimes are. But it's still by far a liberal city. I mean, it's still an urban area, right? And so the civil service is definitely watching their backs right now. And there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. Am I going to have a job? Where is Trump going to go with this? I know people who have gotten those buyout offers who are, considering what they want to do. So it's shaken up. It's definitely shaken up. But, remember too, Washington, D.C. has done nothing but grow, except maybe during COVID, has done very little except grow over the past 15 years or so. So it's not, there's kind of a cry me a river factor there too.
Oh, so much here. Just kind of wrap it up. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, get a copy of his book. I think you'll find it to be very interesting. It goes back in order for you to get information to go forward, Decline from the Top, and it's snapshots from America's crises and glimmers of hope. Matt, kind of looking back a little bit from your book, we've been on this steady, yes, government's growing and become more intrusive, and all of a sudden it hit the wall. This last election cycle, it's more than just a Trump win. A lot of ideologies hit the wall. They didn't work. They don't resonate in people's souls. And we've now, you talk about the Great Reset. The irony of it, the Great Reset might have been Trump. instead of the World Global Association or the World Economic Forum. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Looking back, what do you think was the pivotal moment in the past couple of decades that made America's current state a crisis?
Oh, there's a lot of them. I think that one moment we never quite recovered from was the crash in 2008. And that had untold effects, everything from it stunted millennials' economic growth, us getting married and us getting houses and so on, to it really accelerated existing trends within our economy. And as a result, a lot of places that were deindustrializing or were struggling, they got even more pushed to the margins. It really drove, despite all the spending during the Obama administration, it drove inequality. And I think that is the seeds of the Trump administration, where you have this sense that there's a certain cadre of people in our cities, globalists, whatever, who are getting ahead, but there's a lot of areas that are left behind too. And those areas that are left behind are becoming more conscious of it and are determined to have a kind of political leveling. They want a political solution. A lot of that, I think, traces back to trends that began in 2008 that we've never quite gotten past. And, you combine that, I think, with the decline of traditional values and Christianity that we've seen since the 1960s in this country. And there isn't that, you don't always have the church downtown as the center of town life where you can go, where you can, to really gather people in and to give them a kind of sense of meaning and a sense of spirit. I think in addition to being economically lagging, we also feel like we're spiritually lagging a little bit too. And I think we reached an inflection point where people feel like whatever this is, it's not working, and Donald Trump is our means of disruption.
One last quick question. There's an article out today. I got to research this a little bit, but it was saying that 52% of teenagers now are open to considering learning more about Christ. What does that tell you?
It tells me that we've handed them a world that, again, is not working for them. This is iGen, so-called. They grew up on their iPhones. They grew up in front of screens. They grew up just a very different life than even me, a child of the 90s, understood. And they also grew up in a world that really wasn't churched. It just a lot of the way that American life looked, even for me, and certainly 50 years ago, it was very, very different for them. And I think they're starting to realize, like, yeah, I can look at anything I want in an instant on my phone. I have, I can push a button and I can have anything arrive at my front door. But there's something missing, there's something deeper and something more transcendent that just isn't there. And none of the really reigning ideologies, maybe not even Trumpism, really are answering them on that. And so there's still my sense of talking to teenagers and Gen Z is they're still skeptical of what they call organized religion. They're not necessarily ready to go, jump in the Jordan, go back to church yet. But I think there's a curiosity about spirituality and about religion that, as they age, as they mature, could really become something.
Good stuff. Thank you for your time. You're fascinating. I look forward to more visits. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out Matt's book. It's called Decline from the Top, Snapshot from America's Crises and Glimmers of Hope. Do you have a website?
I don't know, but you can check out the book on Amazon.com.
Okay, good. Hey, thanks for your time, Matt. I enjoyed it immensely. Look forward to more visits.
Thank you, Perry.
All right, God bless.